Hello, everyone. Let me just announce the stream and everyone. Even more Latour. There we go. I'm sorry if I sound um kind of like sniffly and stuff like that. I was crying because I just finished 91 days, and 91 days is a beautiful ending, and it makes me cry every time because it's just so good. Um 91 days is a really beautiful um it's just really beautiful. I don't know what more to say. It's just a really beautiful anime. um, it is, I think, one of the only things that I would ever really recommend to somebody um who like doesn't like anime or isn't interested in anime, because I do think it's just that good. It's just that good. um and I can't really think of anything better. I it's beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, let me mute Discord. Sorry. So sorry if I sound a bit sniffly, but that's why. It's because I was fucking finishing. I was just fucking crying. Um, there is this there is this thing for me, uh, where whenever I'm before we start waiting for people to get in, there is this thing for me for whenever I love something, whenever I like am just completely moved by something. um I experience the exact same cascades of emotions um every time. It's I will cry at the same parts. I will laugh at the same things. I will do this like it's is kind of almost like my first time again. It's something that like is it's how I know something is really special to me. It induces that in me. Um the tour, going back to the tour. The tour is the thing on this, and Factish Gods. And we're gonna take a little detour into that actually before we start. Sorry. Mm. You feel enabled. You hope. You move. In the same way as the word close captured the different ways space is now inhabited, it is the word present that now seems the best to capture what happens to you. You are present again and anew to one another. Of course, you might become absent and far away again in a moment. This is why your heart beats so fast, where you're once so thrilled and so anxious. A word badly uttered, a clumsy gesture, a wrong move, and instantly the terrible feeling of estrangement and distance, this despondency that comes from the fateful passage of time, and all that boredom falls over you again, intolerable and deadly. You suddenly don't understand what you're doing with one another. It is unbearable, simply unbearable. And there's kind of a similar experience I get when pulling over something like. Now that detour is over, now that we're not detouring anymore on that, let us um start the actual book we're reading, which is The Politics of Nature, and not the third essay of Factish Gods, though that'll hopefully be done soon. I love the third essay. The third essay is about love, science, and religion. And it's fucking beautiful. And everyone should read it. The only requirement is that you have loved somebody. For understanding. If you love somebody, you will understand everything about it. Everything about what Latour is getting. Or at least most of it. Enough to understand. But now, time to start the fourth chapter. Skills for the collective. Metaphysics has a bad reputation. Politicians mistrust it almost as much as scientists do. Speculations of philosophies alone in their rooms, imagining that they can define the essential furniture of the world on their own, just what no serious person should be indulging in any longer. It's scorn of this sort would keep us from understanding political ecology. If we were to abstain from all metaphysical mediation, it would be tantamount to believing that we already know how the world is furnished. There is a nature common to all, and on top of that, there are secondary differences that concern each of us as a member of a particular culture or as a private individual. If this were the case, those who have the task of defining the common good would have nothing to worry about, for the bulk of their work would be accomplished. There would already exist a unified, unifying, universalized common world. All they would have left to do would be to bring order to the prevailing diversity of opinions, beliefs, and viewpoints. A thorny task, of course, but not one presenting fundamental difficulties, because this diversity does not touch on anything essential, anything that could involve the very essence of things, matters of fact being stockpiled separately in the cold storage of external reality. Now, to speak of nature in this way, separating the question of the common world from the question of the common good, is to cling, as we have seen in the 3 preceding chapters, to the most politicized of metaphysics, that of nature. Fucking beautiful, fucking gorgeous, 10 out of 10. Latour, beautiful fucking writer, love him. Full marks, plus extra credit. He has this really interesting way. This right here, this section, this entire section, is something that is gone over in very different ways in all of his books, and in every, he goes over it differently each time. It's not the same argument. He's never making the exact same argument. But he is like adding really important shit to it, and I just love it. There's not much. I would say something on this, but there's not much to say. The first section paragraph just kind of speaks for itself, and then we have a. Okay, no, we didn't have a footnote yet. Ecological crises clearly have not immediately undermined this metaphysics of nature. On the contrary, the theorists have tried hard not only to save modernist nature, but also to extend its lease by offering a more important role in short-circuiting public life. Their efforts are obviously desperate ones, because these theorists end up quenching the fire of democracy that they had sought to revive by further humiliating humans through a still more indisputable recourse to the real truth of the natural order. The gulf between theory and militant practice explains the slenderness of ecology's contribution to the common philosophy of politics in sciences. This slowness to react appears all the stranger in that, in one way or another, each ecological crisis has involved the scientific disciplines, researchers, and their uncertainties. Without specialists in atmospheric science, who would have felt global warming? Without biochemists, who would have spotted the prion? Without lung specialists and epidemiologists, who would have connected asbestos with lung cancer? The legacy of the cave must really weigh heavily for us to have remained ignorant for so long of the political novelty of ecology, the constitutional crisis of all objectivity. To remove this contradiction between the practice of ecological or public health crises and the lesson that theorists wrongly claim to be drawing from them, let's go back to nature. We need to be interested in the sciences and in politics at the same time. And we needed to reject the old constitution altogether. We cannot hold on to nature. I'm not proposing to replace a well-organized system with a quirky one, to substitute two houses put together according to due process for the two illegitimate houses of the old constitution. We are not going to enter a land where milk and honey flow. On the contrary, by limiting the easy solutions offered by nature, we have only created new difficulties. The only difference, but it is a crucial one, is that we're going to be able to take advantage of the life experiment, so to speak, in which the collective is engaged. Where the old regime took shortcuts but learned nothing from its experiences, we're going to set in motion a complete complicated procedure for learning how to practice experimental metaphysics. For Latour, the addition of new difficulties isn't actually a problem for him. In reassembling the social, he refers to the sociology that he is doing as slow ecology, sociology, or whatever, however he says it, sociology, because it's slow. And he calls the questions that he wants to raise uncertainties. And he means that quite literally. It is about becoming uncertain. He doesn't want us to have certainty about things before we are engaged with them. Certainty only can ever come afterwards. After something is done, it's the only time certainty can enter the picture. You cannot go in with certainty. You simply might not know. The modernist constitution, in fact, saw debates over ecology merely as a mixture to be purified, a mixture combining rationality and irrationality, nature and artifice, objectivity and subjectivity. And then go to 170 for footnote 1. Sorry, 270. We see this in a caricatural fashion in the discussion about subjective risks and objective risks. Another place for the distinction between primary qualities and secondary qualities is made crudely. The former alone refers to reality, while the latter refers merely to psychic states, manipulation, or culture. See what I mean? 1997. Once the division has been made, the question arises whether to take the eliminationist model by means of force or by means of pedagogy, or the model of respectful hypocrisy, through confinement to the ghetto of culture or through discrete manipulation. And the other solutions, see the testimony collected in the Scooms, Colon et al., 1997. And then we go back to 128. No, we already passed this, but it's fine. The new constitution sees in these same crises disputes that bear not on rationality and irrationality, but on a completely different topic. Everywhere, every day, people are fighting over the very question of the good common world in which everyone, human and non-human, wants to live. Nothing and no one must come in to simplify, shorten, limit, or reduce the scope of this debate in advance by calmly asserting that the argument bears only on representations that humans make of the world, and not on the very essence of the phenomena in question. As long as we thought we were modern, claim to be exhausting the diversity of opinions. Thanks to the unified certainty of the facts of nature, the more science we know, he said, the more rapidly minds will agree, the less disorder we shall have. But who would still agree without further ado to link the notions of external reality in unanimity? With this apolitical politics of public life, it is hardly likely that anyone can unify such disparate groups as those which affirm the world is made up of atoms and those which await salvation from a God who created the world 6,000 years ago. Those who prefer to shoot down migrating birds rather than belong to the European Union, those who want to develop gene therapy to cure their children against the advice of biologists if necessary. Those who wish to vote in Switzerland against the transformation of their rapeseed fields into a laboratory annex. Those which oppose cultivating human embryos, and those others, associations of victims of Parkinson's disease, would expect the same embryos to provide a cure. None of these members of the collective wants to have an opinion that is personal, indisputable, about an indisputable and universal nature. They all want to decide about the common world in which they live. Here ends the modern parenthesis. Here begins political ecology. The choice we have now is thus no longer the choice between engaging or not in metaphysics, between going back to the old metaphysics of nature or practicing an experimental metaphysics that will allow us to follow the way the problem of the apportionment between the common world and private worlds, a problem that was supposed to have been solved once and for all, can again open up and as a result find solutions other than mononaturalism and its disastrous consequence, multiculturalism. We obviously do not wish to return to the metaphysics of philosophers alone in their room, unless by that expression we mean those who, like myself, agree to write up an attentive account of what happens in the newly reunited houses. After defining the general properties of the members of the collective in Chapter 2, and the new separation of the powers to take into account the power to put in order in Chapter 3, I now have to approach the question of the skills that will allow us to follow in real time this experimental metaphysics that the old Constitution, with its obsession with its binary order in nature and society, never managed to register. Still, before plunging into this enterprise and harvesting the fruits of our efforts, we must deal with one more difficulty and protect ourselves against the dangers of one other form of naturalism. And I'm going to highlight this because I think it's important, and we'll make it yellow to signify that it's about something other than what it was. What I was previously doing. The third nature and the quarrel between the two eco-sciences. One's home, habitat, or dwelling is called oikos in Greek. Commentators have often been astonished at the fate of the word ecology, habitat science, used to designate not the human dwelling place, but the habitation of many beings, human and non-human, who had to be lodged within a single palace, as in a sort of conceptual Noah's Ark. How can we explain, people wondered, that a term used for nature external to humanity can take from Greek the most anthropocentric, the most domestic, the most patriarchal of its terms, the one that has always been the most distant from polis in the exercise of liberty? I don't know much about this, but I'm hoping he goes in depth more into this because I don't know much about this. But I actually wonder. We're gonna look at the references, and I might look at them later. Sorry, I keep fucking up. 270. The Akkat 1998, and especially German and Anchor. We're gonna fucking make this. We're gonna make this blue. See if I can look at these. Understand. There we go. And we go back to 131, I think it was. Yes. That's kind of not what I'm confused about. I'm kind of confused. Uh, yeah. Um, I guess I'm kind of confused about this section. I should actually mark it in. I won't actually mark it in red. Red's probably a bad color. Let's make it, what colors have I used? I've used purple. I've used magenta. I've used yellow. So I've used magenta and yellow. Let's do orange. We'll make it orange. I guess I'm mostly confused about this section. How can we explain, people wondered, that a term used for nature external to humanity can take, I'm actually going to close this, can take the most anthropocentric, the most domestic, the most patriarchal of its terms, the one that has always been the most distant from polis, in the exercise of liberty. Is he just saying that I assume what I think he might just be saying is simply that what's it called? Uh that because oikos is translated as household or dwelling, that it is like kind of in opposition to like the city or city state because of uh I guess because maybe the polis was something that could have been more democratic, or because it was collective, maybe. I don't know. I wonder what he means here. The same problem arises with the notion of ecosystem. Yes, okay. Okay. That's why it's that's why he's commenting on this, because um um he's kind of being like uh, uh habitat is like kind of this broad thing, and he's kind of considering it alongside oikos. He says home, habitat, or dwelling. And it is for everyone. But obviously oikos, as you said, is like individual. It's not collective. So it being collective um now, kind of being somewhat collective now in the form of like your habitat, or of like the habitat sciences, is um is very interesting, I guess. The same problem arises with the notion of ecosystem. In supposing that they had surpassed the old limits of anthropomorphism because they were integrating nature and society, users of the term ecosystem were retaining modernism's basic defect, its penchant for composing the whole without the explicit will of those humans and non-humans who find themselves collected or composed in it. They had even found a way to array all beings, humans and non-humans alike, under the notion of a global ecosystem, in a totality constituted outside the political world and the nature of things. The ecosystem integrated everything, but too quickly and too cheaply. And then we go back to 270. The history of the notion of ecosystem is in the meticulous study by Gawley, 1983. The term ecumenical has the same root as ecology. The familiar expression, everything that goes together to form a whole, must not be abused. Ecologists know how incredibly difficult it is to define partial totalizations, even locally. Politicians do too. See the excellent example offered in Western, Wright et al., 1994, concerning the difficulty determining what does or does not form a whole around the edges of national parks when one puts humans and non-humans together. That is footnote 3. We are going to mark this. I'm going to mark this because I feel like this is good. The science of ecosystems allowed us to dispense with the requirements of discussion and due process in building the common world. Obviously, capital failing in a democracy. Science pursued its ravages in philosophy itself, which purported to be putting an end to them. Ecological, perhaps, but not eco-politically correct. That's fucking silly. Going back to 270. This is why, from the introduction on, I refrain from distinguishing scientific ecology from political ecology. I have kept only the latter term. It alone can highlight all the difficulty involved in composing a good common world. Moreover, speaking of complexity in no way guarantees that these political and procedural difficulties will be taken into account. One can short-circuit public life just as easily by oversimplifying as by complexifying. The famous sciences of complexity do not bring us any closer to the problem of composition than do the sciences of the simple. Actually, fucking highlight all those too. That's a good one. 132. Political ecology obviously had a model, another habitat science. That etymology does not distinguish from the first, which is called economy. Economy. It is through economics, much more than through the natural sciences or militant colleges, that common sense regularly encounters nature. That is, the attitude of the nomos to short-circuit the polis. We have succeeded in freeing ourselves from the first nature, that of the cave, and in parentheses, political epistemology. We've been able to put into play the second nature, that ecological natures, thinkers, but our effort would be vain if we kept intact the third nature, purports to assume all the functions of the collective without paying either the political or scientific price. Also, nomos, meaning law, custom, or usage. Is that right? Is nomos just like law, or custom wag? Or it also said usage. Is that right? Okay. After eliminating the poison, hello Lily, of the cold gray nature of the primary qualities, after combating the misunderstanding of the warm green nature of the ecologist, we still have to overcome the obstacle of the nature, red in tooth and claw, of the eco-politicians. The nature that purports to replace the relations of progressive competition in the common world, the law of the jungle governing a nature deprived of all political life. And then we go to 270. And this is 5. A famous line by Tennyson that has become a proverb describing Darwinism. Man who trusted God was love indeed, and love creation's final law, though nature, red in tooth and claw, with ravine shrieked against his creed. And just God was love indeed, and love creation's final law. Nature red in tooth and claw. Very interesting. Not sure I entirely understand it, but sounds good. Sounds pretty good. 32. The influence of this third nature is all the greater in that under vaguely Darwinian appearances, it serves as a springboard inside rather than outside. Back to, I think it's 271 now. Oh, I understand now. Um, I think what this is getting at is that nature went against God. I think that's kind of like the point of that, or something like that. And then footnote 6. Darwin is obviously innocent of the Darwinianisms committed in his name. Despite his borrowings from Malthus, he is in no way guilty of naturalism. The evolution of which he speaks have neither unity nor optimum nor totalization. For Darwin, evolution unifies nothing at all, as Stephen Jay Gould showed with such persistence. Darwin would have no trouble speaking of multinaturalism, since ultimately each living creature possesses its own nature. As soon as one resorts to theories of evolution to speak of nature in the singular, one loses the realities of the pluriverse, leaves only its function as shortcut. This is why it is important to distinguish the appeal to external realities from the procedure for unifying the world that belong, properly speaking, to politics itself, even if we are talking about genes, proteins, whales, cockroaches, or physiology. And back to 132. Now, economics is no more eco-politically correct than ecology is. Nomos and logos rightfully belong to the polis only, provided that they do not serve as shortcuts for damaging the state of law. Economics pays a high price for the harshness that it allows it to claim the title of the most dismal of the social sciences. To all appearances, however, it deals with all the topics we have evoked up to now under the name of political ecology. It too bears on groupings of humans and non-humans, which it calls producers, consumers, and goods. It too seeks to take into account the elements that it has to internalize in its calculations. It too wants to establish a hierarchy of solutions in order to discover the optimum in all its allocation of resources. It too speaks of autonomy and freedom. It too managed to produce an exterior that of the elements that it has provisionally thrown out of its calculations, elements that it has precisely in its own terms externalized. Apparently then, the collective that we have deployed does no more than rediscover the good sense of political economists, a modernist discipline par excellence, that allows us to make rational calculations regarding all associations of people and things that would end up automatically zeroing in on the best of all possible worlds if the state's claims did not intervene stupidly to distort its calculations. By shuffling the whole of the collective together, political economics would thus remain the unsurpassable horizon of our time. Ecology would have only to let itself be swallowed up by economics, as the prophet Jonah let himself be swallowed by the whale. Nature, as we now know, does not refer to a domain of reality, to a particular function of politics reduced to a rump parliament, to a certain way of constructing the relation between necessity and freedom, multiplicity and unity, to a hidden procedure for apportioning speech and authority, for dividing up facts and values. With political economics, naturalism inundates the inside of the collective. Thanks to the notion of self-regulating markets, it will be possible to do without the question of government altogether, since the relations that are internal to the collective are going to be similar to those which connect predators and their prey within ecosystems. 270 again. Sorry, 271. We find an indication of this in a stunning passage in Karl Polanyi. Here was a new starting point for political science. By approaching human community from the animal side, Townsend bypassed the supposedly unavoidable question as to the foundations of government. And in doing so, he introduced a new concept of law into human affairs, that of the laws of nature. Hobbes' geometrical bias, as well as Hume's and Hartley's Quesnay's and Halvid's hankering after Newtonian laws in society, had been merely metaphorical. They were burning to discover a law as universal in society as gravitation was in nature. They thought of it as a human law. If, to Hobbes, man was a wolf to man, it's because outside of society, men behaved like wolves, because there was any biological factor which men and wolves had in common. Ultimately, because no human community had yet been conceived of which was not identical with law and government. The island of Juan Fernandez was neither government nor law, yet there was balance between goats and dogs. No government was needed to maintain this balance. It was restored by the pangs of hunger on the one hand, scarcity of food on the other. Hobbes had argued the need for a despot because men were like beasts. Townsend insisted that they were actually beasts, and that precisely for that region, only a minimum of government was required. No magistrates were necessary, for hunger was a better disciplinarian than the magistrate. To appeal to him, Townsend pungently remarked, would be an appeal from the stronger to the weaker authority. I guess to simplify that, I guess I should probably kind of simplify it. I'm pretty sure what this is getting at is I'm going to say natural law is what I'm going to call it. It is kind of what's being, I don't want to say that, but that there's kind of like I'm gonna call it a law of hunger is what's being purported here. What's his name? Who did it? Townsend discovered the law of hunger, which like had no need, which means that we had no need for like governance through kings or stuff like that. Like goats and dogs on an island. The law of hunger will is better to appeal to than any king. It's a better it will put things in place better. It'll keep things in check better. I guess I'm gonna put it 132. Was I on 133? I was actually on 133. The power relations put an end to discussion in any form. The power in question is not the sovereigns, it is the power vouched for by capital S science of inevitable necessity. No balance, no equilibrium is preferable to the forces of recall of nature in us. The ideal, moreover, would be to have no government at all. And then back to 271 and 8. This question is going to be turned into an artifact. Should the economy be entrusted to the market or to the state? This is as artificial as asking whether scientists are realist or constructivists, or the one that asks whether politics should be anthropocentric or Fusey-centric. See Chapter 5 in The Power to Fall Up. We find an argument similar to Polanyi's in doing it. Fusey-centric? Fusey... Growing. Oh, it's growing. It's growing again. It's growing again. Or growing centrics. Or what would this be? What would this be? What would be a good becoming. Um, I wonder what a good translation for this would be. I'm gonna make a little note of it. I'm gonna do wonder. That's not how you spell wonder. Ah, 133. Inside the collective itself, the bulk of relations between humans and non-humans become an autonomous sphere as distinct from metapolitics in values as the stars, the vast seabeds, the penguins of Adelaide Island. Adelaide Island. Adelaide Land. The three natures combined will stifle the collective for good. The laws of the nature that is cold and gray, the moral requirements of the nature that is warm and green, the harsh necessities of the nature that is red in tooth and claw, put an end to all discourse in advance. Politicians may have the last word, but they have nothing more to say. Thanks to a detour via the meaning of the word save, the genius of the language has given the verb economize the pejorative sense of to spare oneself of the trouble, to take a shortcut. In short, to short circuit. Nothing is better suited to political economics, which we can in fact define as how to economize the political, how to short circuit the work of doing politics for good. 271, and we are on to footnote 9. See the analysis of economics as a short circuit of the political in Carl Schmitt. Wait a second, this is a President Sunday reference. President Sunday reference. A domination of men based on pure economics must appear a terrible deception. If by remaining non-political, it thereby evades responsibility and visibility. For Schmitt, the economy in the 19th century follows religion in the 18th century, precedes technology in the 20th century, and the devices invented to oust politics from playing in the role. That's actually very interesting. I'm actually going to also... Yeah, fucking President... This is a President Sunday reference. This is a reference to make President Sunday continue reading the book. The four functions we sorted out in Chapter 3 are going to allow us to understand how this science of values, this axology, manages to avoid both politics in the name of science and the sciences in the name of the requirements of morality. It is going to use calculus to spare itself the slowness of the work of representation. So now, I guess, Latour is going to be going against economics, I assume? Economics exploits to the maximum the fundamental ambiguity of facts and values, which are as impossible to separate as to blend together. One would think that the modernist constitution had been made especially for economics. We see that this discipline is scientific and must therefore describe in detail the complicated attachments of things and people according to the requirement of perplexity. It will reply that it does not have time to be descriptive because it has to move on very quickly to the normative judgment that is indispensable to its vocation. I'm just gonna start fucking highlighting shit because I'm pretty sure this is all... I've already missed stuff that I should have been highlighting, but I was like, I thought he would just explain it more, but he's not getting to yet because it's still like kind of the introduction. If you acquiesce, albeit in some astonishment at this casual tone, you'll be surprised to see that in order to produce the optimum, economics does not burden itself with any consultation, and its work of negotiation is limited to calculus alone. The requirement of relevance and publicity do not seem to concern it either. Becoming indignant at this cavalier attitude, economics will signal you to be quiet. I'm calculating. It will claim not to need either to consult or to negotiate, because it is a science, and because if it defines what must be, it does so in the name of its laws cast in bronze as indisputable as those of nature. If you point out politely that it is difficult to be counted as a science before devoting a great deal of time to the requirements of the description, before plunging into controversies, and deploying instruments that are as fragile as they are costly, it will reply that it prescribes what must be done. And if you object, once again, losing all patience, that economics does not respect values because it has jumped over all the requirements of prescription, it reports scornfully that it only describes facts without concerning itself with values. I'm gonna fucking. This is good. By allowing the discipline of economics to unfold, one thus keeps the collective, for the cleverest of schemes, from having to produce any description in the name of prescription, from having to hold any public debate in the name of simple description. I'm also going to highlight this. This is also good. With political economics, the impossible task of distinguishing between facts and values, which we have compared to the labors of Sisyphus, becomes so effective that it makes it possible to get both scientists and politicians all mixed up. You can no longer appeal to human values over and against the raw facts. At the same time, one cannot do without the absolute distinction between facts and values. In the end, the common habitat will be calculated, they say, and no longer composed. Vaughan's law's economics will have eliminated eco-politics. The collective, emptied of its substance, will no longer know how to come together. And then we go back. Oh, wait, 171? Sorry, 271? Even though Marxism also criticized the naturalization of the economy, its goal was not to rehabilitate politics, but to subject it still further to the laws of the first naturalization, not of capital S science. This is the strong politicism that Polanyi, a political socialist rather than a scientific socialist, addresses to Marx. The true significance of the tormenting problem of poverty now should be revealed. Economic society was subjected to laws which were not human laws. The rift between Adam Smith and Townsend had broadened into a chasm. The economy appeared which marked the birth of 19th century consciousness. From this time onward, naturalism haunted the science of man. The reintegration of society into the human world became the persistently sought aim of the evolution of social thought. Marxian economics, in this line of argument, was essentially an unsuccessful attempt to achieve that aim, a failure due to Marx's overly close adherence to Ricardo and the tradition of liberal economics. For a radical and very early critique of Marxist and liberal economics, see Tard, 1902. Polanyi seems very interesting. Very interesting. I'm pretty sure with this, Latour intends to somewhat critique Marx. I'm also going to pink this. It would be pointless to have avoided the danger that the appeal to science poses for democracy, if you were to retain at the very heart of the collective the stupefying assertion according to which the production of values is itself the simple observation of a fact. The science of values. Axiology would reign in place of political ecology, short-circuiting both the hierarchization of values and the production of sciences. No, unquestionably, nothing must intervene to attenuate the tension between economics and ecology. Both are equally political. The first takes place apart from due process, while the second should have the courage to give itself forms that are appropriate to its historical mission. The clandestine bicameralism of the first, so typical of modernism, has yet to yield to the explicit bicameralism of the second, so typical of the era that follows, that encompasses, that accompanies modernization and its quick shortcuts. Fortunately, economics mixes science with politics, since we have succeeded in liberating the sciences from the grip of capital S science and politics from the prison of the social world, it must be possible to liberate economics from its failure to dissimulate the search for values under already established facts and the search for fact under already calculated values, making it undergo in its turn the little transformation of chapter 3 by asking by asking how it subjects itself to the two powers of representation. How many are we? Can we live together? Becomes much more presentable, since the capacities for representation are improved at once. Instead of distinguishing vertically between facts and values without ever succeeding, it can easily distinguish horizontally from the top and bottom of the collective. See figure 3.1. So political economics lands on its feet. We can differentiate once again, as the wisdom of English permits, between economics as a discipline and economy as an activity. This is a very interesting. I have a feeling I'm going to like the footnote. I also wanted to also going to do this. We have to go to 11 now. 271. So we're actually on 272. Here, I am extending the reversal carried out by Michel Coulon in the wake of Simmel 1977. I assume it was originally published in the 1900s, as well as Polanyi. A reversal that makes it possible both to keep the virtues of the discipline of economics, in particular the formatting of ties, to avoid the belief that economy defines the basis of the world in Locke's fashion. See in particular, Coulon 1998b. I'm gonna fucking look at that later. And now we go to 135 again. There is no such thing as an economy. It says there is no such thing as homo economicus. There is indeed a progressive economization of relations. We do not find at the bottom an economic infrastructure that the economics situated above would study. The economizers in the broad sense of the term, which has to include accounting systems and modeling scenarios, mathematicians, marketing specialists, and statisticians, perform the collective by stabilizing the relations between humans and non-humans. And then back to 272. In addition to the seminal work of Laurent Thiavant on including economization as a particular form of action, Thiavant, 1986, on accountability, I benefit in particular from Peter Miller's research, in 1944, and from Power, 1995, on the operations specific to marketing, Concho, 1999, Progressive Construction of Economic Theorems, Lepiné, 2003. Polanyi went the furthest toward understanding the science of economics as the chief agent of the economy, a stroke of genius that installed the sociology of economics at the heart of critique of political economics. Usual critics of economism completely missed, going either to scientism or to humanism. To the bewilderment of thinking minds, unheard of wealth turned out to be inseparable from unheard of poverty. Scholars proclaimed in unison that a science had been discovered which put the laws governing man's world beyond any doubt. To the behest of those laws, that compassion was removed from the hearts, and a stoic determination to renounce human solidarity in the name of the greatest happiness of the greatest number and the dignity of secular religion. He's talking about fucking utilitarianism. Polanyi is talking about utilitarianism. That's what Polanyi is talking about. Yippee! Utilitarianism des. We don't have agents of economic calculations in our head. We do have construction of central calculations and profit centers, thanks to which those who turn them can produce, in fact, on paper, certain calculations that sometimes make it possible to coordinate actions. And back to 272. On the materialization of modes of calculation, see Coulon and Latour, 1997. This amounts to making economics undergo the operation of material embodiment the other sciences have undergone thanks to science studies into the efforts of situated cognition. See Suchman 1987, the essential book by Edmund Hutchins. We can sum this up with a slogan, cogito ergo sumus. When I think with precision, it is a laboratory that thinks. Rational calculation exists in economics. Let us look for the laboratory in the broad sense that allows it. Cogito ergo sumus. Cogito ergo sumus. Is this okay? So I looked it up and I got cogito ergo sum. Is this radically different from what's it called? From that, or is that just is there being the U.S. changing stuff radically? I assume you'll know, Pippa. I assume you will know the answer to that question. I'll continue reading, but I'm gonna wait for your response. As soon as we have extirpated economics both from our heads and from the world in order to reduce it to a set of specific and uncertain procedures that sometimes convey agreement, coordination, production of externalities, political economics loses its venom, stops competing with political ecology. Political ecology is quite clearly not soluble in the graphic juices of political economics. The biblical narrative ought to have warned us. 3 days later, the whale vomits Jonah up on a beach so that he can resume his mission. And then we go to 272. Again, the numerous attempts to absorb political ecology into political economy, thanks to the choice of another quantum, for example, energy instead of money, would keep the defects of the old constitution intact, or rather would compound the defects of the three naturalizations, since the meta-economy thus produced would have causal, moral, and natural biases all at the same time. What would one not do to spare oneself the hard work of taking up political life again? The economy of environment, as we shall see, so conversely is an indispensable internalization for following procedures of externalization. I totally fucked that up so fucking hard. Why did it I meant to go to 136. Once back on its feet, economization becomes, as we shall soon see, one of the professions that are indispensable to the functions of the collective. Like the first nature, gray and cold, like the second, green and world, the third nature, red and bloody, during the period which it had sole control of the collective, was only one of the forms of modernization, one of the ways to spare the collective, the progressive composition, or the good common world. Now that naturalization allows us to avoid the task of composition, now that no naturalization allows us to avoid the task of composition, we can finally turn our attention to it. And I need to fucking highlight so much of this. This should up to here should probably be highlighted. I was wanting to know if I should do more because I kept reading. I was like, I should do more. But if Pippa doesn't have anything to say on that, I'm just gonna look it up real quick, really fast, and I'm gonna see. So, sumus, meaning Latin. Versus sum. Oh. Oh. I figured it out, Wag. Sorry, I was asking a question about something. So as you can see here, we can sum this up with a slogan: Cogito ergo sumus. And I was like, is this different from from like the phrase which is cogito ergo sum? And it fucking is. Um, Apparently sumus is would be like it wouldn't be I think, it would be like we think. It would be like it would be pluralized. So it makes it very different. Yeah. Yeah, I looked it up and I got the answer and I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Okay. Well, now that we figured that out, let's frickin' we're gonna frickin' in stream today. Frickin' in stream. We did like another hour. That was pretty good. I gave you guys 2 hours today, and I did it. I would cover the next section, but as you can see, the next section is like 30 fucking pages long. The next section is 30 pages long. So, um, we are not we're not doing that today. We're not starting that. We'll just do this. But I don't know when I'll want to stop, so I'm not going to go on forever. Um, but back to 136. And there we go. And that's it. That's it for today, guys. See you all. I hope you guys all like stream. Once I finish Lost Domain, sorry, once we do the sorry, I already have finished. Once we do the Lost Domain book club, I'll probably do another gaming stream. To talk about some bullshit so I can make videos and put some stuff up for you guys. I'm just kind of chatting a little bit. For when I have work and I can just upload those on days that I have work and be like, that's so you guys will know. All right. Well, see you all.